Hello?
Hi, Rosa.
Yeah.
It's James Slaton.
Hi, James. Thanks for calling.
Oh, thanks for talking to me on such short notice. How do you pronounce your last name?
It's Corey.
Okay. And I've got you on speakerphone just because it's easier for me to write and talk at the same time. I hope that doesn't drive you crazy. Sometimes there's an echo.
No, that's fine with me, and I'm actually, as I said, I'm recording our interview.
That's fine. That's fine with me, but I do appreciate the heads up.
Okay, great.
Well, let's start. Let me start with what I'm working on, just so you can kind of have an understanding of where I'm coming from and going. Working on an article for Probate and Property magazine for the American Bar Association. I'm a lawyer, although I'm a former journalist, but that's been a number of years. And what the article is about is the growing trend, probably isn't the right word, but trend of opposition to sustainable development or smart growth or new urbanism, whatever you want to call it, plans, going before various planning boards and such things, across the country. And this has become a growing issue. I know it's been, in place in California and Florida for some time, but now it's spreading to other areas. So what the article is about, one, is just what's happening, that this is happening, but two, since the readers of this magazine, the audience are, lawyers advising planning departments or developers, or maybe they're involved themselves in these issues, it's not only to advise them as to what's going on, but the nature of the concerns, and then if there's anything that can be done to address the concerns that are being raised, and how they might sort of appropriately and constructively respond. So that's kind of the focus that I'm trying to take here.
So, am I right in assuming that you're assuming that the attorneys or the parties who'd be interested in reading your article would be looking for ways to refute what the concerns of the nation are regarding United Nations Agenda 21, sustainable development and smart growth?
Not really refute, but how to appropriately respond when someone raises a concern. I mean, if you think that the appropriate response is refutation, then yes. But if the appropriate response is something else, for example, I don't know, providing more information to the public about what's being done, or simply not heading down a particular road,
Right.
I think people get caught up in kind of, oh, well, this is a great trend, everybody loves it, and everybody's going to agree, and then they find out, well, okay, wait a second, maybe there are good reasons not to do it, and maybe there is real opposition out there.
Great. Okay.
Kind of the road to hell is paved with good intentions kind of thing.
That's right, and I'm appreciating hearing your point of view, because that's excellent, and that is the right attitude to take on the issue, because it's far more than a trend, and it's not really a fad. It's actually an ideology that was adopted by the United States in 1992 through an agreement, a United Nations agreement called Agenda 21, the Agenda for the 21st Century, and that's where sustainable development comes from. That term is a United Nations term. It was defined in 1987 by the Brundtland Commission, and that's the United Nations Commission on Environment and Development, and that's where the term sustainable development comes from. A lot of people don't know that. And so what it is essentially is a plan to inventory and control all resources, both human and natural, and all means of production in the world. So this is a tremendously comprehensive plan, and it was adopted, signed onto by George H.W. Bush in 1992. And then Clinton, when he took office in 93, about 6 months later, he created the President's Council on Sustainable Development. and that was tasked with bringing sustainable development into the United States, and actually instating it in every single local town, council, county board. It's a global plan, but it's implemented locally. So, when you're seeing a land use issue, it doesn't just start at your county planning department or at your city planning department. This, in fact, the way that it was instated in the United States was that the President's Council on Sustainable Development gave a multi-million-dollar grant to the American Planning Association to bring sustainable development, Agenda 21 sustainable development, into the U.S., and it's a plan for control and inventory and management and manipulation and monitoring of all land use, water, and human resources as well. So when you're seeing this, when your attorneys are seeing this, when they're out there defending or working with planning departments, a lot of them don't know that the American Planning Association, their book, Growing Smart, it's called Growing Smart, a legislative guidebook for management. How did I forget? It's Growing Smart, a legislative guidebook for management and planning principles and the management of change. Something like that. Anyway, that's in every planning department in the United States now. And if you become a planner, you've studied that at university. And Growing Smart is smart growth. So it's not just a design style. It is hardscape, but it's not just a design style. It is an ideology.
Well, I want to go two different directions with that. First of all, with the, I'd like to talk just kind of about, given that it's an ideology, and that it does come from that, whether there are any aspects, when we're talking about sidewalks in a city, or high density development, or light rail, those kind of things, if you take those out of the context of being part of an overarching agenda. I mean, let's just say, for example, I'm in Louisiana, and I'm currently in New Orleans, but the capital city is Baton Rouge. There was talk about light rail between the two to sort of facilitate folks who work in both places, to be able to travel between those two on rail. Some people would call that smart growth. Others would simply say, well, this is just, good business to attach to connect these two markets in such a way. Are there any elements of these things that may be good by themselves, or, in other words, I'm not asking this very well, but the concept that, can you break any of these ideas out and they're okay on their own, or is the problem that it's all sort of being pushed together as a package?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about, is it good to have a place to live, or is it good to have a way to get from one place to another? Of course, the answer is going to be yes. This is, though, an ideology. It is designed to, basically use your tax dollars, either your property tax dollars through redevelopment, infrastructure financing districts, or your transportation dollars to subsidize housing. And this is in specific areas that are now going to be identified as transit villages. And these are high-density developments, mixed use often. And in order to be able to get the money to give to these developers for infrastructure and development of residential, high-density residential, you have to identify these areas as smart growth areas, which means they're complete street areas. They are high on rail lines, or they're on high volume bus lines. And so in order to complete the streets, and you'll see that completestreets.org, in order to make that street complete, you have to demolish what's on both sides of it and construct smart growth, which is ground floor retail, 12 feet high, built right to the back of the sidewalk, 2 to 3 stories or more of residential above, mostly condos and apartments, with one-car parking behind in an alley. This is a development style, but there is not a demand for it. And this is where it's different from, say, Levittown, which was a design style, but right now, your property tax and transportation tax dollars are going to subsidize this. And this is adopted in nearly every state in the United States. You'll find it in rural areas as well as urban areas. And it is an ideology. You cannot separate it from that. It's regionalization as well. It's removing people from the rural areas and into the urban areas. And the more you understand about this plan, the more you recognize why there is such a big push for it all across the United States.
And let me ask a dumb question here. I mean, and this is merely to kind of get the answer. So what's wrong with all that? I mean, if we accept, okay, that is true, that these, we're subsidizing this development, that people are being moved from rural areas into urban areas, that these things are going on. I mean, so what? I mean, why should we be concerned about that?
Well, I love that question, James, because we do live in the United States, and we are guaranteed by our Constitution, and in fact, we are endowed with the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what smart growth is, what United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development does, is it instates communitarian law, which says that the individual's rights are subsumed by or balanced with the rights of the community. And those rights are not delineated, they're not written, they can change at any time and be taken away or, changed, right, at any time. So what you're finding is that you're being told this is for your own good, this is for the good of the community. It's a stealth plan. People don't know about it. In fact, when you're invited to come on down and give your opinion on whatever that new plan is for the remaking of your city center, that's a Delphi meeting where you're being tricked, you're being manipulated into thinking that your point of view is actually desired by your city or county, when in fact that is a predetermined outcome. That plan was already planned before you came in the room, and all they need is so-called community buy-in, because they want to be able to say that the community vetted it, looked at it, approved it, and this is your plan. But this is not our plan. And I think that people need to recognize this across the nation. Most people don't even know that these meetings are going on. In fact, there is a regionalization meeting here in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's called One Bay Area, Plan Bay Area. There's over 7 million people who live in the San Francisco Bay Area. They held these meetings. They did not advertise them. They held 9 meetings in 9 counties, 1 in each county. And they allowed 100 people from each county to come into these meetings, and they actually solicited participants from government agencies, from NGOs, from boards and commissions, people that they knew were already going to be, supporting this plan. So this is not, if this was such a great idea, then they would be able to talk about this in every single town, every county, and every state in the entire country. And it is a stealth plan that is not being talked about. People don't know that smart growth is United Nations Agenda 21, the agenda for the 21st century.
The term Delphi meeting, did I understand that right?
Yes,
Well, I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay. Well, Delphi was created by the Rand Corporation in the 1960s. It's a mind control technique. And it's being used right now in every government meeting that you go to. I'm not talking about your council meeting or your supervisor meeting. I'm talking about meetings where the public is particularly invited to come, where it's for your comprehensive plan, your general plan, where it's a regional meeting to create, a new city center, or a plan for, an idea for rail, high-speed rail that's going through your city. This is a plan where the public is invited, but the outcome is already determined prior to the public coming in. So they are actually directed to a predetermined outcome. When the people come into that meeting, there are facilitators there. There are people at every table who are already vetted and basically guided and directed to implement this plan and to make it palatable to the people who are in the meeting.
So it's kind of stacked. I mean,
yep, it's stacked. That's right. It's rigged.
So audience members are planted.
Yes, some of them.
Whoever's promoting it.
Yeah, I hope you don't think I'm crazy. The plan is definitely crazy. I am not crazy. Okay.
Well, and I was going to ask you that in a second. Not
If I was crazy. No.
And I don't want to get there just yet, but I mean, one of my questions is, well, when you say these things, I mean, it sounds kind of nutty.
Sure does.
How do you, how do you convince people it's not nutty? But I want to get there just one second. I want to talk a little bit more about the meetings. I mean, here's the thing. If you go to a parish, we have parishes here rather than counties.
Oh, okay, right.
Just because we've got to be different with everything we do in Louisiana. If you go to a parish planning meeting, or even like one of these little small town planning meetings, it seems, and I'm just trying to be honest with you, it seems far-fetched to think that there would be this carefully orchestrated plan going on, because frankly, when I go in there, it strikes me as a bunch of kind of bumbling locals that, couldn't plan their way into some kind of conspiracy if they had a roadmap.
Sure.
I just don't give them that much. I don't have that much faith in these guys.
Right.
And maybe.
Yeah, I follow you.
It's a structural thing and not a personnel thing.
Right, exactly. And, I completely understand what you're saying. And in fact, that's kind of how this is able to proceed so fully throughout the nation, is because there are a lot of people running it who don't know what they're doing and don't really understand that they're part of it. But as I said, the American Planning Association does understand it, is a partner. ICLEI, the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives, they call themselves Local Governments for Sustainability. This is an NGO that is I believe they're in Baton Rouge, as well as New Orleans, as well as many, many hundreds of cities across the United States. There are also cities that have cool mayors. These are cities that have signed on to basically agree to Kyoto. And what you're seeing is that the American Planning Association has created a whole generation of planners who have been indoctrinated with this through Growing Smart, a legislative guidebook for planning and the management of change. And they use jargon, they use manipulation. In fact, the American Planning Association is aware that we are now on to all of this. And they did a 12-week boot camp called a Communications Boot Camp, where they brought in planners to their trainings, to their webinars, and told them how to manage the public. Now that the public is becoming aware of how we are being indoctrinated by this. So yes, of course your town council or your parish commissioners or whatever, they may not be aware that they're part of this, but they are part of this. They have been indoctrinated. I know it sounds crazy, obviously it does, but it's not that I'm crazy. I am reporting on something that is a fact and needs to be looked into more fully by all Americans. And of course, anyone who is an attorney should definitely be looking at this, because the Kelo decision is a communitarian law. Yeah. And when you're looking at communitarian law coming into the United States, and of course redevelopment is an issue where you've always been looking at that as being something that was supposedly for the common good, but to change the definition of public use is a very important change in our law. And this is part of United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development.
Well, and there was a lot of outcry about Kelo, and you saw in the wake of that a number of states passing laws to try to prevent that from happening. Sort of pro-property rights, individual property rights laws, to try to prevent a Kelo situation happening there. So I know Louisiana did. There was a great deal of concern. We're a fairly conservative state, but so back to so I think the meetings thing I get. What is APA's? And you had mentioned a grant earlier. What is their angle on this, though? What is their benefit from this? To push this, is it just they're true believers in it, and so they want to push it, or is there more kind of fundamental motivation, like monetary benefit? Why would APA
Well, that's a good question. I think that that needs to be looked into by all of us because the American Planning Association does have, of course, a tremendous influence because they're training planners and their documents are being used to write our policies, statutes, and laws, or ordinances, or local ordinances. Along with the American Planning Association, which obviously is going to be motivated by money, power, and influence, is you'll have the National Association of Counties, the League of Cities, of course the redevelopment agencies, and you'll have your local planners who want a job, who may be true believers because they've been brought up in this, and there are a lot of young planners out there who don't recognize property rights. I think that there should be Nuremberg laws for planners. I think that planners should know that they shouldn't be instating any law that violates private property rights. I think that the American Planning Association is involved now in something that is really reprehensible by creating this communications boot camp that is instructing planners in how to change their jargon, how to essentially hide what it is that they're doing so that the public doesn't understand or does not recognize the management of change that is happening in their city. I think this is wrong. And I happen to be a liberal Democrat. This is, an issue that comes up a lot for people who are on the another side of the spectrum from me. But this is an American issue. We are losing our private property rights, and we do not know. Kelo came out. It was a Supreme Court decision. The entire nation knew about it. If people across the nation were able to hear and understand what it is that's going on everywhere, I think that we would all rise up, and I hope that that will happen.
I think it's interesting you point out your political persuasion. I think, and maybe I have a misconception about this. I think for the most part, I think this opposition to smart growth is identified with the so-called Tea Party movement, which I understand is not. That's more of a cultural term than a real political party because it's not a party. Do you put yourself in that camp, or do you see yourself? Do you try to separate yourself from any political movement and just kind of focus on, look, it's not political, it's basic, these basic rights we're talking about? Do you have to avoid that, or do you really care one way or the other in terms of the association?
Well, as I said, I'm a registered Democrat, and I have been since 1974. And I am going around the United States, and I am talking about United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development. I'm raising awareness on this, and I have been invited by Tea Party groups, by Republican groups. I'll be speaking next week to the California Libertarian Convention. So I will go anywhere that anyone invites me to speak. This is not a left-right issue. It's not a political issue. This is an American issue. We are, so many people are not aware that this is a global plan. It's implemented locally, and it's done through regionalization. And so when you have plans that are called One Valley, One Vision, or One State, One Vision, or 4 states, one vision, or 9 counties, one vision, or these are all the same plan. This is, in fact, I was looking on the internet the other day at the visuals of, maps of these plans, and I came across the Hanoi Center Regional Plan, which is the same as the San Francisco One Bay Area Plan. This is a global plan, and people are not aware of that.
Well, let me pose this question, because personally, I'm pro, property rights or pro individual rights. I live in a sort of a rural exurb from here, and so I'm certainly sympathetic to those ideas. And yet, at the same time, when I go to a place like Seaside, for example, in Florida, or I see some of these plants, they look appealing to me. I mean, I see the appeal in these kind of nifty little walkable areas and the shops and the retail mixed and light rail. I mean, all of that has an appeal to me, so that leaves me feeling sort of conflicted. I mean, just to be honest with you,
I think you don't want to get confused by having an option to live somewhere versus having having to live somewhere and having to subsidize that development. Seaside and what is it? Celebration. These are gentrified. These are created areas. I don't think there are very many people. I don't think there's much of a varied economic strata there. And I think a lot of these so-called smart growth developments are like that. They're gentrified areas. They're areas that only appeal to people who are retirees or vacationers or whatever. When you're talking about smart growth within an urban area, you're talking about your tax dollars subsidizing a particular type of development. And coupled with smart growth, the other element is the Wildlands Project, which removes people from rural areas and moves them into the cities. And it does that by, in a number of ways. In fact, here I live in a rural county, Sonoma County. We have 1,384 miles of rural roads, and our supervisors have just announced last year that they're only going to be paving and maintaining 150 miles of those roads. Now, all of those people who live out in those rural areas, they're going to have those roads pulverized and turned to gravel. If your roads are not paved, if your well is being monitored, if you are being restricted in what you can do on your land, if your post offices are being closed, if your schools are being closed, if your sheriff's offices are stretched farther and farther apart, and they can't serve those areas, you will be coming into the cities. If your vehicle miles travel taxes are imposed, if you're going to be paying at the pump based on what your zip code is, which is coming, people are not going to be able to live out in areas like you live in, and you're going to find that through over a period of time, you will be moved into the cities. They are building the hardscape for this now. That's what smart growth is.
Okay, now that's an interesting distinction, and I appreciate you pointing that out because I really hadn't thought of it in those terms. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is you and like-minded folks are not opposed to these ideas in the abstract. For example, you don't go into Seaside and go, this is awful, it should be demolished, and we should never build anything like this because it's just fundamentally offensive. Instead, it's the idea of when we're sort of these judgments of this lifestyle is better than that lifestyle are sort of being imposed upon us as part of some, this is a good idea so you almost live this way kind of agenda. That's the issue. That's the real problem. Well, it's not light rail in and of itself. It's not high density in and of itself. It's you're going to do it whether you like it or not because that's what we're doing.
Right. And, yes, that and many other things, because, of course, if you have a general plan designation, if you're zoned a certain way, let's say you've got some property in the center of your city and you're zoned a certain way. And, let's say you bought it, it's commercially zoned and you're fine with that. And you're planning to build a little shopping center. Okay. And now you find out that you're general planned for mixed use transit village, and you can't just build your shopping center now. You now have to put 2 stories or 3 stories of residential on top of that, and in fact you're legally non-conforming with the building that you have there now. So you're having a tremendous impact on property values, a tremendous impact on the potential for people to construct on their property, because if you can't get a loan for that, let's say you don't have a track record for building mixed use, you're not able to get that loan, your property is going to sit there until maybe your redevelopment agency identifies it as being something that another developer might want to put something on. So you're finding that people are losing their rights. And yes, frankly, I mean, if you want to go and live in La La Land somewhere, what do I care? I don't care. Buy the land and build on it. If you can put the infrastructure in and pay for it yourself or whatever, as most developers would do, then great. I'm not going to say anything about that. But if you're going to create a situation in a city where you restrict development or restrict use of property or create legal nonconforming uses by changes to the general plan, which are, when a general plan is changed or a comprehensive plan is changed, you don't notify the property owners because it's general, right? It's only when you change someone's zoning that they're notified. So a lot of people don't even go to these general plan meetings, these comprehensive plan meetings. They have no idea that their property has now been general planned for transit village, and they can't use it for what they thought they could use it for. And not only that, but something that is very vitally important that we haven't talked about is the impacts. This is social engineering. And we're talking about, every time you read anything that comes out of the American Planning Association about smart growth, you'll always see that they want more eyes on the street. More eyes on the street. And what this is a way to manipulate and control and manage the population. The community-oriented policing, which is under the Department of Justice, you'll have restrictions on travel. If you have a no-fly list now for airlines, you're going to have a no-fly list for trains. If people are not able to drive private vehicles, they're going to have to be showing their identification when they get on trains. And then if you have to show your ID when you get on a train, well, you're probably going to have your ID on you at all times. These are issues that we as Americans need to be aware of, we need to discuss them, and we need to respect the restrictions that we've put on things like this that are in our Constitution.
Backing up the 1 second, I'm a little lost here as to what is a way, what is this management and control and manipulation? Is it the high density? Is that what we're talking about? Kind of essentially that is what's. Being in one area, you're easier to manipulate and easier to control and manage. Is that?
Well, smart growth, the design style of smart growth is, the building is built right to the edge of the sidewalk, right? Yep. There's very little common area. You have very little common area, very little private area outside of that building yourself. And then the common areas are outside of the building in the, town commons or wherever. So it's all, if you don't think I don't think that this sounds odd, I do. I recognize that it does. But that's only if you don't know about this plan. This is part of the plan. The idea for eyes on the street is part of the plan itself, and these are not my words. These are words coming from the American Planning Association, eyes on the street. That means that they want you to be watching everyone who's out there. They want the people themselves to be policing each other. Now in California, in Sebastopol, for instance, it's against the law to smoke in your apartment.
Really?
Yes, that's right. You can, and so when you have, you're not going to, let's say you can't hang your wash out, or you can't fight with your neighbor, or you can't burn incense, or you can't play an instrument, or, the thing is, if you want to live in an apartment like that, fine, go live in the apartment. Who's stopping you? You want to move out? Who's stopping you? But when you create a design style that is subsidized by our tax dollars and is a requirement, is zoned and general planned for the center of almost every city in the United States now, then you've got a problem. Because you need to look at this. It is not just a building. That's what it looks like, but it is not just a building. It's an ideology. It's social engineering.
Okay, but playing the devil's advocate for 1 second here. When you do have a city, we can take New Orleans or Baton Rouge as an example. There's a limited amount of land, especially in New Orleans because we've got water, everywhere. And I think the proponents would say, well, look, we need to encourage high-density development because we're trying to efficiently use this space. And if we don't, we're not going to be sort of effectively using these resources. And then all the trees will be gone, and people will be spending all their time in cars, and we'll have terrible traffic. I mean, I think that's the response typically. To when you say, well, why is this good? I think that's the response you get is, well, we need to, efficiently use our space because they're not making any more land, and we want to keep the trees and Are those not legitimate pursuits?
Well, you know, when you go to one of those Delphi meetings, one of those plans, you know, let's say it's called Vision New Orleans,
Right.
or you know, something like that, right?
No, yeah, I know.
Okay, you've been to one of those, and you'll see up there on the screen they say you want clean air, you want clean water, you want jobs. Well, who's going to say no to any of that, right? Of course you want clean air. Well, if you want clean air, that means that you don't want private vehicles. There's jargon associated with all of this. And, you know, obviously you prefer to live out of the city and you drive in or you take a bus in. Am I guessing that you drive your car?
Oh yeah, I drive my car.
Okay, you drive your car.
There's a 25 mile wide lake between here and where I live.
Okay, so you drive. Now,
I have a lot.
okay, so why don't you live in town?
Well, I mean, I have security safety concerns.
Okay, you don't want to live in town for those reasons.
Right.
Or maybe you like being out on, you know, an acre and a half or whatever you have out there. And, you know, or that's the way you like to live. The thing is I think it's a great idea to have better public transportation. I do. I think buses are terrific. I think jitneys are a great idea. I think, you know, certain rail, it probably is effective, but you have to look at the costs on that. And, you know, high-speed rail is simply a building block for megaregions. I don't know if you knew that there are now 11 megaregions in the United States. We thought we had 50 states, but now there are 11 megaregions. If you go to America2050.org, you're going to see that these megaregions include Canada and Mexico. They break our borders. You've got, if you look at the Department of Transportation for Louisiana, you'll find the Regional Transportation Authority and the Metropolitan Planning Organization has actually broken your state into regions. And those regions break county boundaries and they break state boundaries as well. So you have these unelected boards and that are actually making policy for you, and you have no impact on that. You can't unelect those people. They're not elected. They're elected officials, but they're not elected to that board. So, you know, we're not just talking about, you know, yeah, okay, if you don't want to live out in the country, then go move into the city. But we're not talking about that.
Okay. So we touched on this earlier, and that is the crazy question. How do you respond to that? I mean, obviously, you know, when people start hearing things about, well, this is an international plan and the UN and things like, you know, you're being controlled or manipulated, or this is mind control. I mean, a lot of people are going to hear that. I mean, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. They're going to say, well, that's nutty. Why should I believe any of that? That sounds far-fetched and, you know, sort of tinfoil hat sort of stuff. How do you respond to that? I mean, what?
Well, you know, I'm glad I'm speaking to a lawyer because, you know, when you're preparing for a case, you get all the facts. And that's exactly what I did. And I'm a litigation support person. And that's how I work. I get all the facts. And that's what I have. This is not, I don't call it the agenda for the 21st century. The United Nations and the United States call it that. Every country who signed on to it calls it that. These are plans that are actually, you know, it's not like I'm inventing any of this. I don't worry about people calling me crazy because I think that those are people who are attempting to malign me in order to sideline me and shut me up. I wrote a book. It's called Behind the Green Mask, UN Agenda 21. It's an excellent book. It is. It's becoming a very popular book, and I'm glad because it documents all of this. The information is all there. And this is not my wild speculation. This is documented information, and it needs to be out across the United States. And especially attorneys need to be aware of this because people who are accustomed to doing research, people who are accustomed to being able to to defend their point of view in a courtroom need to be aware that this is going on. Whenever you take a case, when you're representing a state or a city or a county on one of these issues, you need to be fully aware of this plan because it was adopted by our country.
And in terms of the public educational aspect, and when I'm saying the people saying it sounds nutty, I don't mean just opponents. I mean everyday citizens who you might run into. I would think that at least initially it would be hard to convince someone. Look, I'm not part of the tinfoil hat crowd. I've got legitimate concerns based on legitimate information, and you need to listen to me. And maybe there's not a barrier to people when they hear things, and I may just be a very cynical person, but I would have to think that your average Joe and Jane six-pack, when they hear this, they may not be maligning you or thinking ill of you, but they may just think, well, this sounds kind of kooky. I'm gonna move on. How do you convince people? Look, you really need to go educate yourself.
It's easy. It's really easy because people know that something is wrong and they don't know, this doesn't come with flashing lights and a name on it. It's not called United Nations Agenda 21. It's called Sustainable Development. And so when when you find out that your kid isn't going to be able to go to that school down the block, that instead, she's going to have to apply for admission and may or may not get in, or when you're, when you decide that you need to quit smoking and you go to your doctor and your doctor gives you Prozac, or when you want to get, when you want development permits for putting in a septic system on your 40 acres and you find out that you're in a biotic resource and a view shed for bicycles and you can't do it, or when you're when you go through the come back from your vacation to Mexico and you see that at the customs officer's desk they've got a retinal scan and a fingerprint scanner that's ready there for the future. All of these things are related to United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development. That is a 300-page, 40-chapter book that encompasses every aspect of your life. And once I talk to people about this, I think it's very clear I'm not crazy. I don't worry that people are going to think I'm crazy because I'm not. And this information is out there. It's quite easy. You can look at the actual documents. So I think people need to I think those days are over. The days of calling this a conspiracy theory are really over. This is a conspiracy fact.
Okay. And what's brought about that change?
What change?
That people going from it being viewed as a theory to a fact. Is it just an abundance of information or backing it up?
Well, I think it never really was a theory. This has always been a fact. It's just that people, we're reaching a point where there is becoming critical mass on awareness. And there's tremendous resistance now across the United States. And that's why you see the kind of propaganda that the New York Times has put out regarding, trying to sort of confuse the issue, refer to anyone who's objecting to this as being, a tinfoil hat person, which, I think that's kind of worn out now, that little, name. I mean, I'm going to be buying some stock in the tinfoil companies pretty soon. The thing is that you have to ask yourself, when they're putting so much effort into shutting people like me up and confusing this issue and doing, a lot of disinformation campaigns, people start to say, hey, something seems to be wrong here.
And I know you started off with this, but I want to kind of come full circle back to it, and it's the big picture. What is the end game here of all of this? Why bother promoting high-density development or high-speed rail and all these other various things why would the UN care? Why would APA care? What's the end game? What's their point? I mean, what are they after?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think when you look at globalization, the concept of globalization, you have, basically it's top-down control and management of populations. If you bring people in out of the rural areas and concentrate them into city centers, they're more easily managed and controlled and surveilled. And I don't know if you've heard of food sheds, but your transit villages, which is not where you live now, James, but you'll be in one one of these days, unless you stand up and resist this. Transit villages will be where your concentrated population is, and then they'll be ringed by areas that are just used for food production. And they'll calculate how many people can live in a transit village by seeing how many calories can be grown in the area around that transit village. And then that will limit the population in that particular transit village. And from that you can extrapolate that people would need to get permission if they want to move in and out, or maybe have a child, or travel from one place to another. And this is I'm an intelligent person. This is just an extrapolation. I'm not I'm not saying that I have that's factual. But if you go to Cornell University and food sheds, if you put that in your search engine, you'll find that is the plan. Transit villages ringed by food shed areas, and calculations on the amount of calories that can be grown, and that will determine how many people can live there. So I don't know if it doesn't bother you what I'm talking about. I'm not doing my job here.
Well, I mean, if what you're describing is what's going on, and if we're really heading to that, it bothers me tremendously. Of course, I mean, I have to ask the questions to try to figure out if it sort of makes sense to me that is where we're headed. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd be lying to say that you haven't raised compelling issues, because you have. And personally, just speaking personally, nothing to do with the article here, I'm always very conflicted. I live in this rural area. I work in the city. I have this long commute. So certain ideas of smart growth just appeal to me as someone who's not crazy about their commute, who does like certain aspects of urban living, but at the same time, on the other side of me, like you pointed out, I do live out there and I enjoy that life as well. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I think this is all very compelling food for thought. I think where I have difficulty, and it was something I alluded to earlier, and that is I have trouble believing, when I've dealt with bureaucrats, I'm not impressed with their ability to control the most basic things in their departments, much less this kind of, overarching big power, scheme. That's where I honestly have trouble kind of grasping some of this, is how, you hear people talking about one world government and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. I know, it sounds ridiculous. Well, don't go that far, okay? Why don't you just go to regionalization? You don't have to go all the way to globalization. Go to regionalization. Go to the Department of Transportation for Louisiana and take a look at those metropolitan planning organizations and find out. The fact is, you probably never gone to one of their meetings. Or you might have, but. What you're looking at there is, for instance, in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, there's $200 billion in transportation dollars that will be distributed to the 101 cities and 9 counties of the San Francisco Bay Area over the next 25 years. The only way that those municipalities can get any of that money is if they agree to build smart growth in specific locations within those areas. And I'm talking about actual specific locations, like block-long areas. The only way that there's what it is they're predicting a huge population increase to the area. and then figuring out who's getting what population, and then saying that smart growth has to be constructed in order to accommodate that population. And if the smart growth development is not done, then no other development in the town or county can be developed before that smart growth is developed, or that municipality will not receive any of that $200 billion. Now, we're not talking about just a design style here. And yes, I agree, a lot of these, people have no idea what they're doing and what they're part of. But the American Planning Association, the National Association of Counties, the League of Cities, many NGOs are aware. There are government grants, the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives, you should look into that and see the impact and influence that they have over Baton Rouge, over New Orleans, over the state of Louisiana, over the entire United States. This is a group, an NGO, that was created to implement United Nations Agenda 21 across the world. They say they represent 600 million people, but no one knows about them. Now, these are things that you can't just. My book's really easy to understand. That is almost getting spoon-fed. That's a really easy, nice, short book to read. And I'm not, trying to get you to buy that book. I'll be happy to send it to you. The book's doing very well, and I'm glad, because people need to find out about this. And the thing is yes, maybe your mayor doesn't know. But the planners are aware because they're reading the American Planning Association documents. They're going to the webinars. The American Planning Association knows full well what it's doing. And the President's Council on Sustainable Development, that was a council of 12 cabinet-level secretaries, including defense. And you think those guys don't know what they're doing? How about Homeland Security? This is all part of it. Homeland Security, Energy Department, education, outcome-based education. Your children are being indoctrinated. And, I have full documentation for this. And of course, anyone can find documentation on anything, anywhere, because there's zillions of pages of stuff written. But I'm talking about source documentation.
And it sounds, and maybe I'm oversimplifying, so correct me if I am, but the bottom line seems to me to be, the threat ultimately seems to be personal liberty or individual liberty at the expense of this sort of greater good, the common good, the community, and sacrificing individual liberties to decide where and how they sort of want to live their life. I mean, is that the bottom line that we're concerned about?
Well, a lot of people like the idea of communitarian law because they say, hey, why should the individual, the individual is selfish. It should be for the common good. But the point is, you don't get to decide what the common good is. A communitarian state was Stalin's Russia, or Hitler's Germany, all for the fatherland, or Mao's China. If you're talking about pitting individual liberty, and I'm not an anarchist, I work for the government. But if you're talking about balancing individual liberty against the rights of the community, which are undefined and undelineated and can change at any time, this is something that we need to be seriously concerned about as Americans.
Okay. So the second part of all this, so we start off, and you're wondering kind of what I meant by how to properly respond. If an attorney is representing a city planning department, a city attorney, or an outside attorney brought in to help with some, advising some development, or someone's representing a developer who wants to build one of these traditional neighborhood developments. Would your advice to them simply be stop, don't do it, because it's just not, it's going to end badly? Or is there any way to kind of take some of these things that may be good aspects of smart growth? I mean, like you said, buses are fine. Some public transportation is fine. If people like the seaside kind of development, hey, go for it, so long as you're not forcing people there. I mean, is there any way to sort of I don't know, redeem these concepts and apply them in a kind of agenda-neutral way?
You know, that's a really good question, and it's a painful one, because I think that this ideology is so pervasive at this point that you can't tease out anything from it that's supportable, because a structure has, a structure is neutral. A structure is simply brick and mortar or wood and drywall. It's just a building. It's a box. We're talking about an ideology here that is having a tremendous impact on all of us. Now, if you're a city attorney, we have a city attorney here in the city that I live in, Santa Rosa, California, who has proposed unconstitutional ordinances and statutes for this city, knowing that they're unconstitutional, been challenged in court and lost, and appealed. Now, that's someone I think should be fired. Just because you can, papering them to death is not the way to run our government. And, I think that we need to re-erect our moral standards. And, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about our moral standards. I'm talking about, and that's a difficult thing in the law. Of course I know. I'm a litigation support person. There's always, there's two sides and more to every issue. And, but I think that especially when you're working for the city, you certainly have a moral obligation. You're representing the citizens of the city, all of those citizens. And, just because you think you can get away with something doesn't mean you should.
Well, that is food for thought there, especially about this idea that not being able to tease anything out of it that is supportable. I think that would put people in a difficult position of, either I'm going to do it or I'm going to abstain from doing it, but there's no middle ground. And by doing it, I mean, participating in that representation.
Well, obviously there aren't that many things in life that are really black and white. And the thing that's really important is that people be fully informed, as fully informed as possible. Now, if you're just hearing about this for the first time from me, that's too bad. But here's your chance now, and the opportunity for your readers to get a look at this plan and to start, pulling it all together, because this is a comprehensive plan. So, yes, you can go out there and represent, a city for, against a developer trying to get infrastructure funds or whatever it is, but when you've got your complete streets legislation on the books, you want to ask yourself a question about that. You want to ask yourself what motivated it, who benefits from it, what the impacts of the implementation of it are going to be. Not just for yourself, but for everyone in your city. And sustainable development, getting back to what we started with, sustainable development was defined in 1987 by the Brundtland Commission, the United Nations Commission on Environment and Development. It was defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Now, when you think about that, and you have your sort of, your high standard about what how you don't want to damage future generations, you need to think about whether you're going to, at what point are you going to suspend individual rights and liberties. And I told you, I'm not an anarchist, but we have to expect that our Constitution stands for something, and we need to defend that. And, whether laws are passed in our Supreme Court that do not defend that or not, and then therefore are the law of the land, that's another issue. But as individuals, as upholders of the law, we need to find and support the law that supports the people.
Okay. kind of work through my questions. Is there anything I didn't hit that you think is important to bring out about this topic?
I guess I just want to reiterate that it's not just smart growth. That smart growth is United Nations Agenda 21, but United Nations Agenda 21 encompasses far more. It's a whole life plan. So I'm hoping that, I know you have a limited space in your article, and I'm just one voice, but I really am hoping that you will give this space in your article, and I'm very glad that you're interviewing me. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad too, and I appreciate you responding to my email so quickly. Not that I haven't been a journalist in a long time, but when I was, I always found it very frustrating when people with something to say are so concerned that, well, I'm not gonna talk because I think they're coming from one perspective, and I'm not gonna be treated fairly, so I'm just gonna sort of keep to myself. And I think probably in the internet age, we're probably seeing that even more and more, because everyone sort of has the ability to self-publish now. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, what you miss then, though, is kind of that dialogue back and forth as one person tries to understand another's perspective. Mm-hmm. So I very much appreciate you talking to me and walking me through some of this.
Great, and I hope you do. I hope you do a follow up on this and stay on the issue.
Well, Rosa, I appreciate it, and I will, and I do. Just again to be clear, because I think sort of honesty and good communication is very important. I mean, most of what this article will focus on, it will probably strike you as a superficial treatment of the issue. Again, because of limited space, and because like you said, I mean, it's one perspective, and I am hoping to provide as sort of pedestrian as it might sound, some kind of nuts and bolts advice. Okay, you find yourself in the public meeting, and what are some practical ways to deal with concerns? Mm-hmm. You touched on one of them that I imagine I'm going to hear from a lot of folks, and that is give them information. Give them real opportunities to be heard and participate, not, BS meetings where it's already determined. Because I know that that's a concern. I know that's a big criticism.
Right.
I'm aware to the extent that...
I mean, one of the options ought to be none of the above.
Right. Well, no, I understand.